Story 1. Okay, so when the Nintendo Switch 2 got released, I went in after work to pick it up. I had 4 days off to play, so yay. The employee knows me and asks, "Am I here to pick up my Switch?" I say, "Yep," and she goes to the back to get it for me. As I'm waiting, M walks in and asks the other employee for a Switch 2 for her kid. He tells her they are sold out, but she can pre-order for the next shipment in a couple of weeks. Nope, she wants one now. At this point, mine has come out and getting bagged up. She looks at me when I'm past my bag and asks me for it. I tell her no, it's mine. She tells me it's for her son, and he deserves it for getting all yes. Well, I have read a lot about these Karens. I tell her that this is for my son and he got a plus. So I walk out the door with my Switch, she follows me, and we argue back and forth a bit. I will mention today my allergies have been acting up, so as she starts another tirade to why her son needs my Switch 2 more than my son, I feel a build-up for a sneeze. Now normally I sneeze into a tissue, but today she was pissing me off. I just wanted to go home and play my new console, so I sneezed very forcefully all over her face, which was covered in my snot. I did feel a bit bad, so I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this COVID is kicking my butt." The look on her face was priceless and gave me a pissed-off look and stormed off. I hightailed it to my car and went home to set up and play some Mario Kart. Story 2. Needed background. My country has mandatory conscription. That means every able male between the ages of 18 to 35 has to serve in the armed forces for a certain amount of time. I did my service in the Navy. My specialty was medic, and I finished as a petty officer. After you complete your service, you are placed on the active reserve list, and they can call you in an emergency or for what they call refresher courses. Those can last anywhere from a single day to a full month. This story happened during my very first such course. Also important to note, despite serving in the Navy, because of my specialty being considered essential, I could be called by any branch of the armed forces. For my first refresher, I was assigned to the Army. Now, on to the story. I received a letter instructing me to present myself on a specific date at a certain Army base for a refresher course. I knew it would be inconvenient, but I showed up on the given date with my backpack, wearing my navy blue garrison utilities with chevrons on my sleeves. Immediately, I ran into a problem when a corporal tried to order me to sign for a rifle. Medics usually carry handguns or do not carry weapons at all. After sorting that misunderstanding out, I fell in with the rest of the retrainees, as they called us. There were about 20 of us, ranging in ages from 22 to 45. I noticed that, aside from me, only one other person was wearing a different uniform, light blue, from the Air Force, and he turned out to be a doctor. Everyone else was from the Army, mostly infantry. After 3 days of basically doing nothing, new orders came down. Both the doctor and I would be assigned to join the senior class of officer cadets during their war games. We went to request equipment, and they handed us 2 medium-sized first aid bags with some basic supplies. The doctor asked for more equipment, but the quartermaster said those bags were all we were going to get, as per regulations. The doctor asked for that statement in writing before signing anything out, and the quartermaster provided it. When Saturday arrived, the doctor and I got a ride with the cadets to the exercise area. We set up a medical post in the neutral zone and waited. Our assignment was to provide first aid if something real happened, and to treat and record any of the casualties from the war games. Almost immediately, the cadet acting as captain, let's call him captain from now on, tried to boss us around. He complained about the way we set up our post, our so-called lack of discipline, since we were technically civilians at that point, and our lack of polish, even though we were there only for legal reasons. The acting captain of the opposing team, however, was much more relaxed and respectful toward us. The next morning, the war games began. Around noon, the first casualties started trickling in. Each participant explained the nature of their mock injury. We recorded it, and the doctor decided whether they were walking wounded, needed to spend time in the infirmary, or were out for the rest of the games. Since it was not a live ammunition exercise, and because of our very limited supplies, We pretty much gave each cadet a paper with their new status. The following morning, first thing, the captain burst into our post in a terrible mood. He started shouting that we were not doing our jobs. The doctor calmly asked, "Calm down and explain." "You're not doing your jobs. I don't know who my casualties are," the captain shouted. "We gave them a paper about their status," the doctor replied. "That's not good enough. You have to dress their wounds. Do I have to tell you how to be a doctor?" "I don't think it's a good use of our small supply of resources," the doctor explained. "No, you have to use it, so I can know who my casualties are." "I still think it is a bad use of resources," the doctor insisted. "I gave you an order. I'm acting captain, and you're just a warrant officer," the captain yelled. "Okay," the doctor said, "but it will be your responsibility if something happens." The captain stormed off after that. A couple of hours later, the first casualties of the day began to arrive. I asked the doctor what we should do. "You heard the man," he said with a grin. "Full trauma protocol." We exchanged mischievous smiles and opened the first aid bags. From that point on, anyone who came in received the complete treatment. For example, if someone had a bullet wound to the leg, we cut the pants open, sterilized the area, padded and bandaged it, and then declared them evacuated for medical attention. If someone came in with a head wound, they went through the full concussion protocol. A surface head wound meant sterilizing the area, applying 3 pads, and securing them with several bandages. By the 10th casualty, our supplies were completely gone. And then, karma struck. They brought in the captain himself, this time with a very real sprained ankle. He immediately started demanding that we bandage him up so he could return to command. "I'm sorry," the doctor told him. "We're out of supplies. We have to call in for resupply." "What? How can you possibly be out of supplies?" the captain shouted. "Despite my telling you beforehand that we had very limited supplies, you ordered us to treat every casualty as if it were real." "The supplies are now finished," the doctor explained calmly. The captain began spouting threats, but the doctor ignored him and put in an official request for resupply. The aftermath. Not long after, a couple of umpires, 2 lieutenants arrived, along with the quartermaster, a sergeant, bringing more supplies. The captain tried, unsuccessfully, to pin the blame on us. When the umpires heard about the order he had given, they shook their heads and immediately removed him from command. According to the quartermaster, the captain had already gained a reputation for being difficult during training, but had received the post because of family connections. His behavior during the exercise only confirmed that assessment. For the next 3 days, the doctor and I went back to our original system of giving papers to the cadets to record their mock injuries. During that time, we treated only a couple of actual minor injuries, which was what we had been prepared for in the first place. I don't know what happened to the captain afterward, but for the rest of the refresher course, we had a surprisingly good time. Story 3. This happened about 30 years ago, and my mother recently recounted it during a family dinner. Back in the 1990s, my mom worked for a large company, which I will refer to as Company W, as an accountant. Her boss, the head of finance, was an unpleasant man. Despite being fairly wealthy, it was a major company and married with children. He often tried to flirt with younger women in the office. After a few years, my mom, being the excellent accountant that she is, noticed irregularities in several financial statements. I don't know the technical terms, but she realized that someone had been taking company funds for at least a couple of decades. Concerned, she reported it to the head of finance. Instead of addressing the matter, he belittled her, called her names, dismissed her claims, and threatened to fire her if she mentioned it again. My mother is not someone who breaks down easily, so instead of backing down, she decided to gather proof. A couple of months later, the head of finance brought in a new hire, a very young woman, fresh out of college to be trained under my mother. My mom immediately understood what was happening and began looking for a new job. In the meantime, she trained the new woman, who, according to my mom, was not the brightest bulb. Company W had a particular policy regarding termination. If an employee was dismissed for reasons other than misconduct or violations, the company would allow them to officially quit, giving them a week's notice and pay. It was considered a fair practice. One day, the head of finance summoned my mom and informed her that she was being fired. She quickly invoked the policy, insisting on her right to resign instead, which frustrated him, but he had no choice but to comply. Now for the malicious compliance you've been waiting for. The head of finance, in a rather rude tone, told my mother that if she was going to leave that way, she might as well do an exit interview. My mother had a light bulb moment and told him that in that case, she would. As a note, an exit interview is a formal procedure similar to a job interview, but conducted when leaving. It allows employees to explain their experience, the reasons for leaving, and provide feedback for company records, usually overseen by human resources. You can already see where this is going. So, she was scheduled for her exit interview. When she went in, she was required to bring files relevant to her work. I can't recall the exact reason, but it was necessary for the process. My mom arrived with 3 large boxes of files, each containing evidence of the embezzlement. She presented them to the interviewer, who, according to her, was stunned. She handed over all the evidence, explained her reasons for leaving, and described how the head of finance had treated her, including how he had replaced her with the new employee. She then completed the process, walked out of the company, found new employment, and moved on with her life. It was not until a decade later that my mom learned what happened afterward. At the time, my dad was working as a delivery driver and made a delivery to Company W. While there, he struck up a conversation with an employee, mentioned that my mom had once worked there, and explained how she had left. The employee then shared quite a story with him. In the year following my mother's departure and exit interview, her evidence was brought to Human Resources and the Chief Executive Officer. The Chief Executive Officer ordered an internal investigation. Hidden cameras were placed in the accounting division. Every document was screened and photocopied. Tiny details were scrutinized, and bank records were checked multiple times. As you can probably guess, the truth came out. The head of finance had indeed been stealing from Company W. But that wasn't all. The cameras also caught him engaging in inappropriate behavior with the young employee he had brought in, including staying after hours and being overly affectionate inside the main office. To make matters worse, the footage showed him treating subordinates poorly and being unprofessional with other women in the workplace. Still, the most serious issue was the embezzlement. Over the course of more than 30 years, from the time he was a junior accountant all the way through his promotions, the head of finance had managed to steal over $1 million from Company W. The employee who spoke to my dad did not know the exact details of how he managed it, but he did know the outcome. The head of finance was summoned to the Chief Executive Officer's office after all the evidence had been compiled. Let's just say he likely wished he had only been fired. He was arrested for embezzlement, inappropriate workplace conduct, and several other charges my mom could not fully recall. The young woman who had been hired to replace my mom later revealed that he had started a relationship with her before bringing her into the company. Shockingly, he even told her about his scheme. Her main role, according to her, was to help him cover his tracks so they could enjoy a wealthier lifestyle. She didn't even fully understand what accounting involved beyond managing money, which made her the perfect cover for him. But his troubles did not end there. When his wife discovered what had happened, things grew worse. The employee who told my dad about all this had not personally seen the confrontation, but a colleague of his had. Apparently, the wife came in while the former head of finance was being escorted out. She confronted him directly, struck him across the face, and shouted at him before declaring that she would be seeing him in court for a divorce. My dad never learned the exact details of what followed after that, but one thing was clear: the man's life was completely ruined. And while my mother is not a vindictive person by nature, she admitted to feeling some satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served. The lesson here: never underestimate an accountant who knows their work inside and out. To clarify, the malicious compliance in this story lies in the exit interview. when the head of finance sarcastically told my mother she might as well go through with it. She followed his instructions exactly and presented the boxes of evidence. She wasn't seeking revenge, she simply did as she was told. She hadn't even realized the full scale of what he had been doing. One final note. The chief executive officer's involvement was particularly significant because not only had the head of finance been stealing from the company's funds for years, but according to my mom, the two of them had actually been friends. That made the betrayal even worse. And as my mom only learned the full story a decade later through my dad, who had been told by a Company W employee, it's possible that some small details may have been altered over time. But the core of the story is undeniable. Her decision to comply with an order at her exit interview helped expose decades of wrongdoing. Story 4. Today, I visited Disney for the first time since I was 9 years old. It was such a fun day, even though the lines felt much longer than I remembered. Then again, maybe I was just so excited as a kid that I did not notice the waiting back then. My friend and I quickly discovered the single-rider lanes, and we took advantage of them since the wait times were shorter. It did not bother us to ride separately. While we were waiting in that line, a family of 4, a mother, 2 daughters, and a father squeezed right through the middle of the line holding hands. Several people around us were visibly frustrated, asking what they thought they were doing. The mother loudly claimed that they had forgotten something on the ride. They made it to the area where the single-rider lane, Disney's Fast Pass lane, and the original standby line all merged close together. Suddenly, a woman behind me shouted, "What exactly did you forget?" Everyone in the single-rider lane grew frustrated as we realized the truth. She had no intention of retrieving anything. She was simply trying to cut the line so she could board the ride with her kids. The family ended up getting shuffled into the pre-ride movie area before my friend and I. We were shocked that no one had pointed this out to a staff member. Meanwhile, all of us single riders started joking and bonding over how bold and entitled this lady's actions were. When my friend and I finally reached the pre-ride area, I pulled aside one of the employees and explained what the woman and her children looked like, along with what she had done. He told me that since they were already in the line leading up to the ride cars, there was little he could do. When we finally made it to the car boarding line, I could not believe my eyes. There was the woman again, along with her 2 kids. I stopped yet another staff member and explained the situation all over again. She nodded, said she would let someone know, but then walked in the opposite direction of the ride operators. At that moment, one of the kids ran up to a man who was standing directly behind my friend and me. She tugged on his arm and said, "Come on, Dad." That was when we realized the father had been hanging back behind everyone else. The father refused to join them, likely because he had overheard all of us in line complaining about their dishonesty. People began talking louder and louder, openly criticizing the family. We all agreed this was such a poor example to set for children. Why should anyone feel so entitled when everyone else was waiting the same, some of us for hours? Why lie just to get what you want? The whole line was making sure the family heard exactly what we thought of their actions. The father kept his head down in embarrassment, letting others step ahead of him, while his wife and kids inched closer toward the ride. By that point, I had enough. I turned to the group standing in front of me and asked if they would mind letting me step past them, so I could tell the ride operators exactly what had happened. I told them I was determined not to let this family get away with it. They happily agreed and even encouraged me to go forward. The mother was standing near the walkway, blocking the path because her family was next in line. I gently tapped her arm and said, "Excuse me," while giving her a direct look. She slid to the side without saying a word, though the glare she gave me was sharp. When I reached the ride operator, I calmly explained, "This lady and her 2 children cut through the entire line using the single-rider lane." She claimed she had forgotten something, but that was not true. You can ask anyone in this line to confirm what happened. The operator nodded, clearly taking my words seriously. At that moment, the woman's expression changed. She looked at me with a mix of shock and anger, her eyes narrowing as though she could not believe I had exposed her. Then, in a burst of aggression, she stepped toward me, raised her hand, and actually tried to swing at me. Gasps rippled through the line. Thankfully, I had expected some sort of outburst, so I stepped back quickly, and her swing caught only the air. The operator immediately raised their hand and shouted for security. Before things could escalate further, another woman in line came up to the operator to verify my story. "She's telling the truth," the woman said firmly. "We all saw it." More people began speaking up, some even raising their voices to make sure the operator knew just how many witnesses there were. The mother's face grew red with anger as she tried to argue, insisting that we were all lying. She gestured wildly, claiming we had misunderstood, but the louder she grew, the more people in line spoke up against her. The noise became a chorus of frustration as the entire crowd united, determined not to let her or her kids get away with cutting the line or with her attempt to lash out. Security staff arrived quickly and stepped between us. They spoke calmly but firmly to the woman, and when she tried to argue again, they motioned for her and the children to step out of the line. The crowd cheered as she was escorted out through a side door, while her husband stayed back, still looking down in embarrassment and refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Everyone in line clapped and even laughed a little, relieved that the situation was handled fairly. My friend gave me a thumbs up, and several strangers patted me on the shoulder, thanking me for speaking up. In that moment, it felt like all of us had bonded over standing up to dishonesty and entitlement together. After the family was escorted out, the line finally began moving again, and the energy around us shifted. The frustration and tension that had built up for so long turned into a kind of camaraderie. People were smiling, shaking their heads, and swapping comments about how unbelievable the situation had been. Some joked that we had all just lived through a mini soap opera right there in line. When my friend and I finally got on the ride, it felt even more exciting because of everything that had happened beforehand. We laughed about it during the ride, joking that we would never forget the day we stood our ground at Disney. At the same time, we could not help but feel a little disappointed that it took so long for action to be taken. The first staff member had brushed it off, and the second walked the other way. It really showed how important it is for regular guests to speak up when they see someone breaking the rules or acting entitled. Later, as we walked through the park, we even saw some of the same people from that line. They waved to us or gave us nods of approval, almost like we had all gone through something together. It felt strange, but also kind of nice. It was like the whole incident had turned into an unplanned group experience that none of us would forget. On the ride back home, my friend and I talked about it more seriously. We both agreed that the whole situation was a lesson. Cutting in line might not seem like the biggest thing in the world, but it is unfair to everyone else, especially when children are watching. What kind of message does it send to teach kids that it is acceptable to lie and push your way ahead of others? And when things escalated, with the mother even trying to lash out at me, it showed just how much frustration and entitlement can boil over when someone is caught in the wrong. Looking back, I was glad I spoke up. It could have been easy to just let it go and mutter under my breath like everyone else. But if nobody had stepped forward, the family would have gotten away with it. Instead, the crowd came together, voices were heard, and fairness won in the end. Disney is supposed to be a place of fun and magic, and it felt good to know that the people in line, strangers just like me, were all willing to protect that by standing up for what was right. Story 5. So, Ben came home last night, and I took the liberty of cooking dinner. It turned out to be a funny coincidence because he also brought takeout from my favorite restaurant. We both looked at each other and laughed, realizing the moment was more serious than it seemed. We sat down and decided to share both meals buffet style while talking things through. Thankfully, we were on the same page about the situation. It broke Ben's heart, but he admitted he just could not forgive her, nor could he trust her again. I felt the same way. We cried together, partly because Ben had also been on the fence about a new job opportunity. It is not guaranteed, but he had been unsure about whether or not to apply. The job would not take us too far, but it would still mean some distance. Ben hesitated because he worried about being that far from his aging parents. We would be moving together, and there was even the possibility of looking toward an engagement within the next year or so. We want a long engagement, and if he gets the higher-paying job, it would be perfect. It would give us a chance to start saving seriously for both the wedding and the honeymoon. At that point, I looked at him and asked directly, "So, would she end up being invited?" He paused before suggesting the idea of a small family dinner. If, by then, she had reformed, since we are talking at least a year into the future, then perhaps she could be part of that. But when it comes to the actual wedding, she would have to prove to me that she could be trusted. She is his mother, and he hates the thought of hurting her. But he also knows it would be far more painful for me to have her duplicity ruin our wedding. So, it is what it is. He is not taking any of this lightly. He is determined, and I believe him. He is also understandably angry and hurt because of her behavior. As for the present, her belongings will be mailed back to her along with a letter that Ben and I wrote together. The letter outlines her behavior, makes it clear that Ben and I are a team, and emphasizes that she is responsible for her actions and the consequences of them. This time, her behavior has caused such harm and distrust that she is essentially back in timeout. She is to have no contact with me at all and only extremely limited contact with Ben. He will not respond to her directly except through text messages when absolutely necessary. Health updates and important life news will go through his brother, who volunteered for this role, and he will share those updates with the rest of the family. Emergencies aside, she is not to contact us at all. Ben will not be reaching out or updating her directly. Any inquiries from her must go through his brother, who will only share what we explicitly allow. She is not to mention me at all in any way. She is already completely blocked from contacting me, and she is not to show up at my home, my workplace, or anywhere else. If we cross paths in public, we will remain polite but will not engage, and she is expected to do the same. Ben loves his mother and is saddened and confused by her behavior, but he no longer wishes to give her any more chances beyond respecting the boundaries we have set. We typed and printed the letter and will also send it by email tomorrow to make sure there is a paper trail. The siblings, along with their significant others, are all in agreement about setting the same or very similar boundaries. It is not just because of me, but because the more everyone discusses the situation, the more they realize she has been showing prejudiced behavior. She had been very subtle about it until I came into the picture, and now the truth is clear. Everyone is disappointed and upset. The brother who will remain in contact with her is the one with medical training and the knowledge needed to help their parents. Because of this, he has taken on the responsibility of being the main point of contact. He is comfortable with this arrangement and even volunteered for the role. My future mother-in-law is unwell, but her illness is not terminal or life-threatening. My future father-in-law helps her manage, but he is older and relied on the children for additional support. Now, that support has become limited to the one son who agreed to handle communication and provide help when necessary. As for my future father-in-law, he is in the clear. He had no idea that my future mother-in-law had made false accusations about me until Ben asked him directly. When he found out, he apologized repeatedly, even extending the apology to me in a group text chat with both Ben and me. He explained that he had hoped she had simply been forgetful, but he admitted the accusation was completely out of line. He also clarified that before leaving my place, he asked her if she had all of her belongings. She confirmed she did, saying she had both her wallet and her house keys. Because of that, he assumed he had just misremembered what she brought with her. I am tired, and I had to return to work today, but Ben already sent the box of her belongings by overnight delivery yesterday. I feel awful about the entire situation, but I am also thankful that he and the majority of his family are on my side. However, Ben's aunt has been pressuring him to show respect and to properly love his mother. Her husband and some cousins have been doing the same, but Ben has not given their opinions much weight. They only reach out to him, and he has chosen not to let their interference bother him. That is where things currently stand. I think the ongoing conflict is mostly resolved unless something extreme happens, which I honestly do not believe will be the case. I doubt she has the energy or motivation to escalate things further. My focus now is on hoping Ben gets the new job. If not, I am still applying for higher-paying positions myself, and we have agreed we will move based on whichever opportunity gives us the best financial stability. Story 6. When I was in college, I took a class with this gem of a professor. On the first day of class, he asked how many people thought they would make an A. This being a tough engineering school where a C actually was average, something like 5 students out of a class of 60 raised their hands. He then announced that's how many A's he would give out that semester. All of our tests for that class were multiple choice exams we took online. We were allowed to refer to our notes during the test, and we were allowed to study from old tests as long as we didn't refer to the old tests during the exam. Fair enough. I studied for the first test, but didn't have access to any old exams, so I did fine but not great. By the time the second exam rolled around, I had made a friend who was in a fraternity that had multiple copies of old exams from this professor. We and a couple of others took advantage of the rule, allowing us to study from old tests. We quickly discovered that on these 50-question tests, the professor had a repertoire of about 75 questions he pulled from. On the first copy of the test, we studied from we took the time to work through the answers to make sure we understood. By the time we got to the fourth copy, we could answer before we even finished reading the question. Exam time rolls around and, just as with previous years, he pulled from the same pile of questions. I think it took me 12 minutes to answer everything correctly. In hindsight, I probably should have let the clock run for a bit. We had an hour. But I went ahead and submitted it because I had other things to do. I checked in with the others I studied with the next day, and all of them had gotten 90% plus. Sweet, definitely using that plan for test 3 and the final. The next day, we all received an email from the professor letting us know we were being reported to the dean for an honor code violation. He claimed he had never had anyone make better than an 80 on one of his tests before, so the fact we all made 90% plus was clear proof in his mind that we cheated. This being an engineering school, we were all nerds who were pretty scared about receiving such an email, but we agreed the best course of action was to talk to the professor before he went to the dean to tell our side of the story and see if we could sort things out. We reached out to him and he agreed to meet with us after class. When we met with him and laid out our case, he was surprisingly receptive to our explanation. I think in reality he didn't want to go through with the hassle of reporting us to the dean. So we left the meeting feeling pretty good and agreed within our study group we would keep studying from the old tests. Well, about a week before test #3, this guy announces to the class that because some of us had found the previous test so easy, the next one would have twice as many questions in the same amount of time. Being the cheeky sob I am, I asked him as I was leaving class what would happen if someone made a 100 on this test. "God help you on the final," was his response. So we used the same approach in studying for the test and found the same pattern of a limited set of questions. Of course, in addition to the extra questions, he had promised all of the questions on this test would be new. So while we again got to the point we had the questions and answers memorized, we tried to make sure we understood the concepts as much as possible to deal with what we expected to be his wrath. Test day comes around and lo and behold, 87 of the questions are pulled directly from old tests. 10 are from a guest lecture where he basically pulled the question and answered directly from the slides. And 3 were filler questions like 1 + 1 = sign and the earth revolves around the sun, true or false. I knew I had everything right. I also knew I didn't want to screw myself and everyone else for the final. I purposely answered the filler questions incorrectly so if he looked at the results he would know what I had done. I got my 97. I never heard from the professor about that third test, but I like to think of him rage scrolling through the results. I don't remember details about the final, but do remember the format being the same as what had been announced at the beginning of the semester. My study group also worked together on a group project, which we also made A's on, so if he really only gave out 5 A's that semester, we received them all.